Hello everyone. Today's case is a mystery and it was one that was requested by a viewer. And at first I didn't think there was going to be enough information for me to actually make an entire video on this case because there honestly isn't that many articles on it. That is, until I went down a rabbit hole and found an interview that the Unfounded podcast did with the missing person's mother. And that's when I realized that this case truly is a twisty-turny mystery. And that there was so much more in this case than I ever truly knew just from the limited information that's online. So shout out to the Unfounded podcast for that interview. I'll have them linked down below. I definitely recommend going and checking it out. But let's get into yet another mystery of a young man disappearing in a rural area. 19-year-old James Gregory Lee, who went by Jamie, was born and raised in Grande Prairie, Alberta, a small city 456 kilometers northwest of Edmonton. He grew up very close to his mother Julie, his father, and his two older twin brothers who are around 3 years older than him. Jamie was described as being well-mannered with a great sense of humor who was into sports and the outdoors, including fishing and camping. When Jamie turned 18, he graduated high school and immediately moved away from home. But I say he moved away from home, but he really only moved about 4 blocks away with 6 of his buddies that he'd known since kindergarten. But as I said, he was very close with family, so even though he had moved away from home, every night during the weekday, he pretty much went home for dinner. And out of high school, Jamie became a welder, which was something he was very passionate about. And he didn't have his driver's license yet at the time, so his mother Julie would end up, driving him to work and picking him up after work. Jamie's life was seemingly going very good. He'd actually just gotten a raise at work and had been accepted into an apprenticeship program right before he'd gone missing. He'd also just gotten his driver's license and his parents had given him a vehicle to drive. Jamie would end up disappearing the last long weekend of that summer. It was Saturday, September 3rd of 2011 when Jamie woke up in the morning and headed off to work. When he got off, he would end up calling his mother around 4 to 5 p.m. that day. This would be the last time that Jamie's mother Julie would ever hear her son's voice again. She was actually on the road driving home from an Edmonton hospital where his father had been in the ICU after being on and off dialysis. His father actually had a rare disease that had caused his kidneys to fail, and they had actually just gotten the news that day that Julie was actually able to donate a kidney to him. She'd been approved as a match. Jamie had called to tell them that he had just gotten off work and he was excited because he had changed his mind and decided he was going to go camping for the weekend with his friends. He ended up asking his parents if he could grab a tent from their home during the call. Now, this area that they were going to be camping in was along the Smoky River and it was called the Smoky Flats. It was approximately 60 kilometers from Grande Prairie, 10 kilometers from the main highway down a logging road in the middle of the wilderness. The Lee family had actually been going camping in that river and to that area for Jamie's entire life, so he knew this area very well. And during this phone call, his parents didn't notice anything off or strange. They knew the exact area he was going to be going to, they knew all the people he was going to be going with. And it wasn't just the Lee family that knew this area well. Everyone in the surrounding, city and area went camping at this river. And Jamie and his friends had gone to the spot many times together before too. After ending the phone call with his parents, Jamie went and picked up a female friend and the two of them ended up heading over to the river to meet up with his roommates and their girlfriends who, if you remember, they'd known each other since kindergarten. They'd known each other their entire lives. His roommates/friends and their girlfriends had actually gone out the night before on the Friday because they didn't have work that weekend and they were going to be spending the entire long weekend there. Jamie, however, had to work on the Saturday, so he actually wasn't even supposed to go camping that weekend, but he had decided after work that he was going to go out anyways. Apparently, it was actually unseasonably warm that weekend as well, so hundreds of people from the area flocked to the campgrounds to spend the weekend there. So because of this, it wasn't just like an isolated group of people camping there along the river. There were hundreds of people there, all in different groups hanging out. They would all go and mingle with each other because everyone kind of knew each other. It was more so people knew each other than they didn't know each other there. So it was hundreds of people hopping around, drinking, mingling at this tent, going over to that tent, maybe going over to this campfire and hanging out there with these people, and then going back to their own campfire. Everyone seemed to just be having a good time. But as the night went on, Jamie's friends would later tell police and family that Jamie began to act strange and not like himself. Now, the information about what exactly happened that night is very limited. From what I gathered, everyone was drinking, everyone was drunk, and at one point, Jamie had gotten so upset that he tried to get into his vehicle and drive off. But according to his friends, they didn't want to let him drive because he'd been drinking, so one of them got into the vehicle with him while the other one stood outside the vehicle, and they were trying to convince him to give them his keys and to get out of the vehicle and not drive. Now, this is where things escalated because Jamie wasn't getting out of the car. So one of the friends decided to physically grab Jamie from his Jeep and drag him out of the Jeep, which caused Jamie to hit his head on the vehicle. Friends would later tell family and police that that night Jamie had been extremely upset over his father's illness. Now, after Jamie hit his head, he rightfully got even more pissed off, and he ended up telling his friends off and essentially telling them to leave him alone, and he was going to go walk it off and get some air, basically. Which Julie said was something that was very common with her son. He was one of those people who, if he got upset or angry, he needed to go walk it off and blow off some steam. And then he would come back once he cooled down. Now, this was all happening around 4 or 5 a.m., so it was pitch black out in the middle of the woods other than the campfires along the shores of the river. The last time Jamie's friends reported seeing him was when he decided he was going to go blow off steam, and they watched him walk out of the light of the fire and disappear into the darkness.
He was really upset about his dad's health. Like, his dad is gravely ill. He has this rare disease that attacks his kidneys, and et cetera, et cetera. Jamie got really upset about that and wanted to leave and drive home. The kids took his keys because they didn't want him driving. They got into an argument over it, and Jamie walked away from the campsite. Now, the boys did try and follow him. They discussed, and Jamie, of course, didn't want anybody following him, and that was that. So they just let him figure he would walk it off and come back. That was at about, I'm not sure what time of the night it was. I guess about 4:30 was the last time anybody had actually seen him. They were camped a little ways around a corner, so he walked up the hill and out, and then that's the last anybody has seen him.
Only an hour later, the sun was already rising, and Jamie's friends realized that he was not there and no one had seen him. So those who had quads jumped on their quads and began driving around the area trying to see if they could find Jamie. The friends who were awake woke up the friends that had fallen asleep, and they all gathered together to start looking and seeing where he had walked off to. Now, the big issue was they couldn't just call Jamie to see where he had gone, because there was absolutely zero cell service in the middle of the woods there. And apparently, even if you went outside of the campground area, because it was so rural, even outside farther away from the campground, it was very spotty and patchy service. So because of this, a couple friends even jumped in a vehicle and drove all the way back to Grande Prairie to see if Jamie had gone home, somehow hitched a ride or something and made it home, and he was just, at home sleeping at this point. However, when they arrived back to their house, Jamie wasn't there. Those friends ended up calling other friends in town to see if they had heard or seen Jamie, which they hadn't. So at this point, one of the friends would end up calling Jamie's brother Aaron to see if the family knew where Jamie was and to fill them in about the situation. However, again, the family also did not know where Jamie was. The last thing they knew, he had called the day before saying that he was driving up there to go camping. That's all they knew. Now, it would turn out by complete luck, there was actually a search and rescue group training in the Smoky Flats that day. So they were immediately notified that Jamie was missing, and they began helping aid in the search and trying to find him. So right off the bat, around 7 a.m., people were searching for him just about an hour or so after he'd walked off. As noon came that Sunday, Julie would receive a phone call from one of her older sons who'd tell her that Jamie was missing. The RCMP would be notified very immediately after as well. Jamie's family would end up rushing to the campground and would actually arrive there the exact same time the RCMP did. Jamie's friends would all stay in the area. They spoke with police, and they even extended their trip for 3 more days to help in the search, which we've seen in a lot of recent cases, aka like the Riley Strain case. We've seen in a few other cases where a young man will go missing and all of their friends will literally just get up and leave and not help in the search at all, which is very strange. You'd think if someone is a really good friend to you, you'd stay and want to help. Yet there are so many cases where the friends don't. However, in this case, it does seem like these friends were actually really good friends of Jamie's, and they were basically like family to him, and they all stayed and helped for days. They also all seemed to be very cooperative with police. Not long after the search started, just after noon, Jamie's brother Aaron actually ended up finding some very interesting things. He would end up finding Jamie's first aid card as well as cigarettes, and he found these items near the only bridge that crosses the Smoky River that would eventually lead out of the campground towards the highway. No signs of Jamie would be found in that area or anywhere near the woods. There wasn't any signs of a disturbance in the ground, like he had possibly been attacked, or maybe an animal had dragged him off and there was no blood. There was nothing. Only his first aid card and his cigarettes. Now, also keep in mind that the Google Map images that I'm showing you here right now, the river in these photos looks very full. It looks like a very fast, large, rushing river. However, that weekend when Jamie went missing, the river was actually very dry. As far as Julie said, it wouldn't even go up to your knees in spots. And it was unseasonably very warm that weekend. So the river wasn't as large and rushing as it looks here. They were actually camping on part of the dry part of the river, and like people were hanging out in the actual riverbed, it seems. So if you're looking at these images from Google Maps, it might make you think he could have fell in the river or something like that, but we'll get to that it definitely doesn't seem like it was a possibility. But then it leads us to wonder, why were these items found on the ground by this bridge? Well, Julie seems to think that if Jamie did end up walking off to blow off some steam, he might have tried to pull his cigarettes out of his pocket, which caused his first aid card to fall on the ground. And then when he realized he didn't have his lighter, he might have been frustrated and thrown his cigarettes then. He might have just wanted to have a smoke to, blow off some steam. Sometimes people like to do that, smoke to relieve tension. And when he realized he didn't have his lighter, that would have made him even more upset. This first aid card was something he was required to have for work. And if we remember, he had just been at work earlier that day. So he might have just shoved it in his pocket and forgot it was there. So when he pulled his cigarettes out, it fell on the ground as well. So that must have meant that Jamie had been there. He'd walked at least 40 minutes away to this bridge to blow off steam. Now, Jamie's lighter would later be found inside of his Jeep, which was also searched, and there was no blood where he had hit his head, which, could help determine how hard his head was hit. It clearly wasn't hit hard enough to draw blood. And people came out in masses. There were ATVs, helicopters, fish and wildlife, oil field, logging, and wildlife officers all came to help search. Boots were on the ground from locals who drove from 2 hours away after work to come help search. Residents came from all over the area because this hit really close to home for them. It was a young man, and this was an area that everyone in the area would frequent. So the fact that one of their own went missing from a place that felt safe to them was very concerning. And it's really beautiful to see this happen in cases. I feel like I mainly see this in Canadian cases quite a lot. There's this sense of community when someone goes missing. People come from all over and flock to the area to help search. Julie said that the area around that campsite for miles was searched so thoroughly that some of the ground was flattened in the woods because of how many people trampled through there trying to search and do grid searches to try to find if Jamie had been in the woods there. Maybe his head injury was worse than thought and he collapsed or something and he was laying there in the woods, but those woods were thoroughly searched for kilometers and kilometers and he was not found. No signs of him were found there. Again, no blood was found in the area. Nothing other than that card and those cigarettes were found by the bridge, which kind of led the authorities and everyone to believe that, again, this wasn't like a traumatic injury that had happened to him and he collapsed somewhere or an animal attacked him and he was possibly laying in the woods somewhere. There was absolutely no sign of him there. Now, when it comes to the river, as I said, the river was so dry that year that people were walking in it. The RCMP even told Julie that if Jamie had fallen into the river, at most he would have just gotten wet and then stood back up and walked out. So it seemed like him being washed away or drowning wasn't a theory at that point. Still, authorities went up and down that river searching just to be sure and to cross it off the list, but nothing was found. Now, about a week into the search, a table would end up being put out on Highway 40 where you turn down the logging road to get to the campground so that any passerbyers could, be questioned or come forward if they had information and let everyone know. And eventually, an individual would stop. That brought a lot of red flags to this case. A lot of red flags. A red logging truck would end up pulling over on the side of the road, and a man would end up stepping out that had shoulder length, long blonde hair, and he seemed to be in his 30s. Now, the woman that was working this table that was out by the road was actually one of Julie's coworkers that she had known for years. She trusted this woman. It was someone she was very close with. And later she would end up recounting that this 30-year-old-ish man would end up getting out of this truck, walking over to her and telling her that he had picked up a boy about a week ago from that exact area. He ended up giving a description that exactly matched Jamie and said that he had picked the boy up on the other side of the bridge. That same bridge where Jamie's card and cigarettes had been found. Now, the trucker claimed that the boy by the bridge looked bloodied as if he'd been in a fight. And he claimed the boy that looked like Jamie was asking him for a ride out of the campground. The truck driver said that he told the boy that he could give him a ride out of there. However, he was actually taking his logs to Grande Cache, which was 2 hours in the opposite direction of where they were now, which was the complete opposite direction of Grande Prairie, where Jamie needed to go. Now, this area, Grande Cache, is actually also in a very remote area at the foothills of a mountain with indigenous reservations in the area. Now, according to this truck driver, the boy that looked like Jamie didn't care. He basically said, cool, let's go. He got in his truck with him, and the truck driver ended up driving him all the way to Grande Cache. After this, the truck driver says that Jamie got out of the vehicle, and after this, he didn't see him again. Now, this truck driver allegedly ended up giving Julie's coworker his name and his phone number, and she then ended up passing all this information over to the woman who was running the search at the search and rescue meetup spot. And her job was to collect all the information that people were bringing in, record it, make sure everything was kept organized and together. However, All of this information about this truck driver wouldn't be brought to Julie or authorities until a month after it happened, when Julie's coworker ended up seeing her at work and asking her if anything ever came of the truck driver and the information that he told. Julie was, of course, confused and shocked because she hadn't heard of any truck driver. So when she ended up going and contacting the woman who had been running the search, the woman that was running the search all of a sudden claimed that she had no clue about any truck driver and that Julie's coworker had never told her anything about a truck driver. So what the hell? Now, to this day, Julie still believes her coworker because it was a woman that she had known for years and years and years. She was very close to her. She trusts her very much, and this woman still works with her to this day in helping to find Jamie. And she completely believes this woman, her coworker, when she says she told the woman running the search about the truck driver and gave her the phone number and the name. So Julie essentially believes that this woman running the search might have messed up some way. She might have lost that information, or she had been told it and then just didn't think it was important and misplaced it or something. And then when Jamie was never found and this information got brought up to her, she realized she fucked up and that this information could have led to maybe finding Jamie. She panicked and basically just said she didn't know anything about it. Essentially, if she was given this information, she lost the smoking gun to this case, in my opinion, which is extremely bad because it's been 13 years. We'll talk a lot about all that later, but Jamie's still not been found. And if this information had been kept and saved, he might have been found by now. There may be answers. And because this information got lost, when Julie ended up going to the RCMP and telling them about it, they essentially didn't really care, it seemed, because it was just a he said, she said at this point. There was no solid information to pass on. There was no phone number. I guess there was a description of him, but it seemed at this point that police couldn't really do anything. You'd think, in hindsight, that police would have gotten a sketch done or something of this truck driver from the memory of the coworker so that it could be out there to the public, like, look out for this person. They may be a person of interest, but for some reason that was never done in this case. And that's a big question I have for police. Why is there no sketch of this truck driver? Why did police never try to track this truck driver down? Because you'd think they could have just gone to the logging companies, sifted through anyone that worked there that drove that specific truck that had that description of having long blonde hair in their 30s. That's a pretty specific look. But tragically, it looks like that was never done. Why? I don't know. The fact that someone literally admitted to picking Jamie up and then that wasn't looked into and that information didn't come to light till a month later, that truck driver, if he is truly out there, could have fled anywhere. He had a month lead on everyone. Well, let's go back to the search because this all ended up extending far out. But during this time, after the truck driver told the woman information, it was allegedly passed along but wasn't, there was still more stuff going on.
The family of a missing teenager refuses to give up hope even though RCMP have called off the official search. Friends and volunteers continue to scour the wilderness south of Grande Prairie looking for signs of James Gregory Lee. 19-year-old disappeared on September 4th. He was partying at a campsite and decided to leave on foot during the early morning hours. His family has a new tactic in the search.
This coming Sunday and Monday, we have hired professional searchers with tracking dogs to come out from Canmore.
Lee's family has set up a trust fund at all TD branches for anyone who wants to help fund the search efforts. They also say they are desperate for more volunteers. And this afternoon, RCMP released pictures of the style of running shoes that James had on at the time, hoping this may spark some new leads in the case.
A tracking dog would be brought in, and this dog would end up tracking Jamie from the campground back down the road they'd come in, back across the river to a tree. And the handler said that they believed that Jamie had stayed at that tree for a while because the scent was very concentrated. From there, it said that the dog ended up tracking down a game trail to a gravel pit. As you can see here on Google Maps, there's a gravel pit over here near another little campground area. And all of this is after the bridge. Gravel pits in the area were searched, and at one, footprints were found that indicated that someone had walked in and around the gravel pit. Now, it couldn't be proven that these were Jamie's footprints. However, the day before he went camping, he had just bought a brand new pair of shoes, meaning the tread would have been extremely defined in them. Family actually went to the store and found the exact same pair of shoes that he had bought that day, and it would turn out that there were only two pairs of shoes at that store which were size 13 in that style. And one had been bought by Jamie, and the other pair had also been bought just around that weekend as well. Meaning that this wasn't only like a rare tread, but Jamie also had a very large shoe size that wasn't very common. Now, due to the terrain, it's very hard to get a footprint out of gravel. They were unable to determine if those shoe prints were in fact Jamie's. However, Julie believes that these could have been Jamie's shoe prints, especially since the dog had tracked to that area. Family would eventually pay for additional RCMP track dogs to come in because police didn't want to pay for those services, so the family had to pay out of pocket for them. Now, these dogs ended up starting where that last dog had left off, and they ended up finding his scent across the river from where he'd been camping and tracked it back to the road before disappearing. And it seems that they tracked around the area where his card and cigarettes were found. Now, this was also a very busy area, very busy road, so could it have been because of that? Possibly. These dogs were also brought in nearly a month after Jamie had gone missing, so the scent could have also faded in that time. But what was the most interesting is that the dogs stopped at the area where the truck driver would later claim to have picked Jamie up. Julie saying, and I quote, "The dog handlers came up with a report that they gave to the police. They said within a 95% certainty, Jamie was not there dead or alive and had not been there for 24 hours after the disappearance." End quote. After this, however, the RCMP ended up telling the family to shut the searches down. Now, as usual, police were keeping things very close to the vest, but Julie would end up finding out through Jamie's friends' mothers, who she was also very close with, that his friends had been polygraph tested, and it seems that they were all being extremely cooperative with police. Now, since police weren't looking into this whole trucker theory, Julie herself tried to contact the logging companies trying to get that information since police weren't. However, because of the Freedom of Information Act in Canada, they would not provide her with any information and essentially denied her from trying to get any information that would try to help find her son, which really sucks. So since that wasn't working for Julie, she then went on to different trucker sites and Facebook groups and stuff like that online, trying to spread the word on Jamie's disappearance and seeing if anyone recognized this 30-year-old man with the long blonde hair. Now, at first, no information came in from this. However, about 2 to 3 weeks later, she was contacted by a guy who said that he actually worked with someone who drove a very similar red logging truck who was similar to the description of a man she was looking for. And they also worked in Grand Cache. So Julie would end up driving down, taking pictures of the truck, but when she tried to contact this blonde-haired man, nothing came of it. And then eventually the original man who had contacted her ended up telling her that he was mistaken and that his buddy, the guy he worked with, had actually bought the truck after Jamie had disappeared. So that was a dead end as well. At this point, the blonde-haired truck driver seemed to be in the wind. And the fact that this blonde-haired truck driver seemed very, very eager to come forward at first and give information, but then when people are looking for him, he doesn't come forward, really rubs me the wrong way. You think he would come forward again and be like, yeah, it was me, I picked him up, I drove him here. But he's never come out of the woodworks again. And since everyone in this area was talking about Jamie's case, you think he would have heard about it and heard that people were looking for him. But the ball wasn't just dropped there. Jamie's case has been sitting on a shelf for over a decade now, and according to Julie, there are months of information missing from it. Authorities also refuse to mark Jamie's case as a cold case at this point, despite not seemingly actually investigating it boots on the ground anymore, because they claim they still occasionally get tips. In my opinion, police failed Jamie left and right in this case. I feel like at first when he went missing, everything was working out like as perfectly as you could hope it would work out when someone goes missing. It was just an hour or so after he actually was last seen, people were searching for him. They were driving around on quads, ATVs, thoroughly searching the forest. Police were called in not long after. There was a search and rescue group in that area. Like, how lucky is that? That was right there ready to help search. And they were searching just 2 or 3 hours after he was last seen throughout that area. His family, RCMP, all of those people came by noon that day. There were hundreds of people that came in to help search for him. Everything was going as perfectly as you could hope. But then after that, it's as if the case just fell off after that. After he wasn't found right away, it's as if police gave up, it seems. The fact to me that they never got a sketch done of that truck driver, even if they didn't know his name or his number, there has been lesser known about a suspect or a person of interest before, and more things have been done. You know what I mean? It's very strange to me. The fact that authorities wouldn't bring in their own search dogs, the family had to pay for search dogs to come in, they wouldn't do that right away, is odd to me. It's weird. It's like as if police just completely gave up after he wasn't found immediately. And my heart hurts for Jamie's family. Now, before we get into theories, I want to talk about a few strange things that were happening in the months after Jamie disappeared. His parents would end up buying a heater that plugged into the lighter port of their vehicle so that it could help heat up the car because the heater in the car didn't work that well. But they'd have to take out this device because it would still run after you shut off the car, which could cause a fire. Now, according to Julie, they would also always leave their car doors unlocked. However, they claim that on multiple occasions, they would wake up in the morning and go to the car and find that that heater had been plugged back in to the lighter port. On top of this, they would always leave the doors to their home unlocked, which is something that I do not recommend. But I guess they felt like if Jamie was going to come back home, they wanted him to find the doors unlocked so he could just come in. But that is extremely dangerous. I don't recommend it. I get people in small towns are more trusting, but we see so many bad things happen because people just leave their doors unlocked. I do not recommend that. But on multiple occasions after Jamie went missing, the family would hear some weird noise downstairs or outside of their home. However, they kind of at first just assumed it was one of the other people in the house, getting up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom or something, go to the kitchen to get some water, until they realized that it wasn't any of them. They kind of corroborated each other's stories and realized it wasn't each other. So who was causing this noise in the middle of the night? So one night, it seems like when this noise was heard again, Jamie's brother got up and ended up finding a chair that was either in the kitchen by the door or just outside the door. I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was a chair that was near the door, and it appeared as if someone had been sitting in it and using it. A few months later, while Julia was at work, she ended up walking back to her vehicle and finding footprints in the snow around her vehicle as if someone had been walking around and tried to go inside it. Now, she ended up calling police. Police came, they photographed these footprints, and they ended up sending this information in and did an analysis on these footprints. And according to Julie, they came back as an exact match to the shoes that Jamie had bought the day before he went missing. Those very rare shoes that were a size 13 that not many people wear with a very unique tread. On another occasion, Julie ended up coming home from work, and when she approached her front door, she had found that someone had stuffed alpine wildflowers, roots, dirt and all, like as if they had just been ripped right out of the ground, into the screen of her metal door. Now, Julie says that these flowers more commonly grow in mountainous areas. They're wildflowers, such as the areas near Grande Cache. As you can see here on the map, there is a large mountain range just south of Grande Cache. Around a year later, almost to the exact day, Julie again would come home and find wildflowers on her front porch. She says that after this, every few years or so, things are left on her front porch around the exact same time of year, which was just after Jamie went missing. She says one of the last things that was left on her porch was actually a medallion made of jade that had been hand carved. And she said it wasn't hand carved very well at all. It definitely wasn't professionally done or store-bought. So who is leaving these gifts? Well, that is something we don't know. But it's been 13 years later, and there is truly no answers to where Jamie is or what happened to him. Jamie's never been found, and it seems like police are no closer to solving this case. So let's talk about theories. What is so strange to me is that people were searching for Jamie just an hour or so after he was last seen, but yet he seemingly vanished. If he did truly walk to that bridge from where he was last seen, it would have been about a 40-minute walk at that point from the main campground there, so it would make sense. But what happened to him after that is the main question. If he was just trying to blow off steam and he walked over there, I mean, that would make sense if he had tried to take out his cigarettes, he didn't have his lighter, he got pissed off, threw them. But the big question is, where did he go after that? Did he try to continue walking all the way out to the main Highway 40? If he had tried to do that, it would have taken an additional hour and 45 minutes from that bridge. And people were already searching by then. So you think they would have found him walking. So it truly only makes sense to me that something happened to him by that bridge, whether that be he accepted a ride from someone or he was abducted from that area. It also makes me question how well his friends are describing that night, considering everyone was very drunk. It makes me wonder if they're telling the complete truth about what happened that night, the fighting wise. It truly doesn't make sense to me that Jamie would have just been so drunk and upset about his dad's illness that he would try to drive off and flee that campground. It makes me feel like something more was going on that was making him want to flee. He seemed to very eagerly want to get in his vehicle and leave. If he was simply just sad, why wouldn't he just, I don't know, sit by the campfire and have a good cry or go for a walk or something? You know what I mean? He was around people he'd known his whole life that he was close with. So you think he'd be able to cry in front of them if he was just sad because he was drunk about his dad, etc., etc. You get what I mean? And if he had just gotten upset and did, get pissed off at his friends because they ripped him out of his vehicle and he hit his head, he wanted to go blow off steam, why wouldn't he just walk back to the campground then after he had cooled off? Because his vehicle was there. Why would he just abandon his vehicle there? Unless there was something more serious going on at the campground and there was a more serious fight. Maybe his friends felt bad in hindsight. They, sobered up, realized Jamie was missing. Maybe that someone had a fight with him. Maybe they got into a fist fight or something. Jamie walked off pissed. And when they realized he was missing, they felt really bad about that. So they just didn't want to talk about that. But then everyone would have to kind of be in on not talking about that. But the thing is, obviously I don't know Jamie, but I don't see any 19-year-old getting so upset over their dad's illness, which they just got good news over, that they would try to flee a campground that they're there with all their friends, drunk in their vehicle, to go home when he could just sleep it off in a tent. Something, in my opinion, happened where he might have got into a fist fight with someone. He wanted to get out of that area because he didn't feel safe anymore, or he was that upset that he just wanted to go home and didn't want to be near those people anymore. And that is why he fled and walked 40 minutes to that bridge and then potentially accepted a ride from a stranger. Again, the truck driver, if he is telling the truth, if he does exist, said Jamie seemed bloodied, like he had been in a fight. And again, if it's true what the truck driver said, Jamie accepted a ride in the completely wrong direction, which in my opinion states how upset he was and how unsafe he may have felt. That is, unless the truck driver isn't telling the full truth and actually may have abducted Jamie from the bridge area, noticing how vulnerable he may be, how intoxicated and upset he was, took advantage of that, and that maybe there was some kind of struggle, which is how Jamie's cigarettes and card fell out. Remember, Jamie did look very young for his age. He had a baby face. He looked like he was maybe 15 or 16 despite being 6'1", so someone with bad intentions might have thought he was just a very tall minor. But let's say Jamie did accept a ride on his own free will. He wanted to get out of there. The first person that asked him, maybe this truck driver, he said, yes, please get me out of here. If that's true, it makes me question why he'd be fine with going the opposite direction. Maybe he thought, okay, as long as I can get somewhere where there's signal, even if it's 2 hours in the wrong direction, I can call for someone to pick me up. Because again, there was no signal in that area. So he thought maybe if I get to a major town or city, there'll be signal and I can call for help from there or call for someone to pick me up from there. But then that makes me question, if the truck driver did let him out in Grand Cache and he did make it there, why he wouldn't just call for help then or for someone to pick him up. It also makes me wonder if he was dropped off near the mill, there had to be other workers around. It was broad daylight by this point. It would be getting closer to maybe 7, 8, 9 o'clock, right? Why has no one ever come forward to say that they seen Jamie get dropped off there or witnessed him in that area, other than this alleged truck driver? And if he did get dropped off there, why, again, wouldn't he, one, call for help, but would he really accept another drive from a stranger all the way back to Grande Prairie if someone offered that? I feel like he would have just called, for his parents to come pick him up or something. Again, he was very close to this family. If he had asked for someone to come pick him up, they would have, came and done it on the drop of a hat. They would have been there immediately to go pick him up. It also makes me wonder if this truck driver did pick Jamie up, had to have had a conversation over that 2-hour drive. They wouldn't have just sat in silence. So you think the truck driver would have asked Jamie what happened to him, why he wanted to leave the campground, if he had been in a fight, et cetera, et cetera. You think some kind of questions would have been brought up over those 2 hours. But then it makes me wonder if this truck driver does exist, are they telling the truth? Because we do know that criminals quite often like to insert themselves into investigations to see if people are looking towards them, to see what information police have. And some of them honestly just like the attention. So maybe this truck driver did come back to the area, noticed the stand, and decided, hey, maybe I should see if they're looking into me. Stopped, talked to the lady by the road, realized they're not looking anywhere near me, fucked off. Especially since he seemed so eager to tell the woman working the table that he had picked Jamie up, but then in the aftermath never came forward again to say, yeah, it was me. It makes me also wonder, could this truck driver had lied to Jamie if he was by that bridge and found him and told him, yeah, I'm going to Grande Prairie, get in my truck. But instead, the truck driver took him somewhere else and did something nefarious to him. Or again, if Jamie somehow did make it to Grande Prairie, could he have hitched a ride with a different truck driver that had worse intentions? Again, these communities are all very close and everyone was talking about this. So if this truck driver was out there and wanted to be found, I think he would have come forward by now. But I think we always have to look into alternate theories. I guess there's always a chance that he did hit his head. So maybe he did have some kind of trauma, wandered off, doesn't remember where he is or who he is. But again, you'd think since everyone was looking so immediately after he went missing that he would have been found very quickly, I'd think. And since everyone knew about him in the area, you'd think someone would have seen him if he had wandered to a different town or something somehow. Again, everything's very far away, so I don't know how that would be possible. But if he did hitch a ride with a truck driver, they brought him somewhere, you think someone would have recognized him by now. I mean, if we do want to bring in all those strange things happening after he went missing with the footprints by Julie's car, the presents being left, I guess there's always the chance that maybe he joined a cult or a convent, or maybe even somehow became part of an indigenous group out there, that he maybe could be coming back to leave his family little things to let them know he's okay. But then why wouldn't he just come forward and tell them, hey, I'm okay? Why would he leave his family for over a decade worried? That just doesn't make sense to me. And again, if he had memory issues, how would he remember to go to his mother's work and to go to his home, but not have enough memory to let them know he's okay? You know what I'm saying? And I also think it's very strange and very lucky that no one spotted the person over these years that have been leaving the gifts. It does make me wonder, could it be the truck driver that's returning to leave these gifts to maybe torment the family? We've seen that happen in other cases before, where killers will taunt or torment a family. It just doesn't make sense to me that Jamie would have ran off somewhere because his life was going so well. We do see cases where someone's life's not going very well, they're depressed, et cetera, and then they disappear. And it makes you think, okay, maybe they did join a commune or run off somewhere. That would make sense. But in Jamie's case, he just got a promotion. His job was working out exactly how he wanted it. He just got a new vehicle. His dad was seemingly going to be getting better. There was great news about his health, and to this day, he's still alive now. He got the kidney. He's still living 10 years later. If Jamie was that upset over his dad, you'd think he'd want to be there for him, not run off and not be there for him. So his father's illness making him upset that night is something that really throws me off. And again, with alternate theories, it wasn't cold enough for him to walk off into the woods and die of hypothermia or of the elements at that time of the year, like we see in some other cases. And also on top of that, again, all those areas were thoroughly searched, so the idea of him just having a medical episode or something happening didn't seem to be possible. The river was too shallow for him to drown in. And again, I know people can drown in very small amounts of water, but you think he would have just been found where he died then. If an animal had gotten to him, you'd think that there would have been signs of a struggle, of dirt being moved or something, of blood. Unfortunately, if it was something like a bear or a mountain lion or something, they tear people apart essentially. There would be pieces, there would be blood, there would be evidence, you'd think of that. There was also a lot of people around in those campgrounds in that area, so you'd think he would be screaming for his life. People would have heard screaming or something maybe. I know a lot of people think his friends had something to do with this, but I honestly don't think they did. I guess there's always a chance they might have, but to keep a secret like that for this long, I feel like it's not as plausible as especially the truck driver theory. And I feel like once you bring up the truck driver theory, if the truck driver theory is completely true, which again, Julie completely believes her coworker, her friend who talked to this truck driver, there's no reason for that woman to have lied about that information. It kind of just throws all those other theories out the window. If you really think about this, think about the authenticity of this truck driver's statement. Please always look at someone's statement and see if they could be lying or not and what information they provide. And that truck driver provided information about him picking up Jamie by that bridge, which was the exact spot where the tracking dogs stopped, which was also the exact spot where his card and lighter were found. That is information that wasn't known to the public because that ended up happening after the truck driver made that statement. So in my opinion, that would most likely mean that the truck driver wasn't lying about picking Jamie up at that bridge, or at least taking him from that bridge. That's the stuff that police look at to see if people are telling the truth when they provide statements like that. But I mean, I guess there's always the chance that the truck driver was just lying for attention, although I don't know how he would get information that exact. It does often happen in cases though. It's just weird. He knew Jamie's exact description. He knew the exact last spot Jamie would have been. In my opinion, I do believe that this truck driver exists, and I do believe that he most likely was the last person to see Jamie alive. Again, remember, this is a rural area. We see many cases of Indigenous women who are kidnapped while hitchhiking in areas like this in Canada. They're on rural roads in the middle of nowhere, and areas like this all the way to British Columbia. And to think that Jamie might have met a similar fate trying to hitchhike in that area is very scary, especially since he was so upset and intoxicated. He could have possibly easily been taken advantage of, especially since people are searching so quickly after he was last seen. It doesn't make sense to me that he just walked off and continued walking and disappeared into nowhere. I think he truly was picked up by someone somewhere very close by, whether that be the mystery truck driver or someone else. And in my opinion, it's truly awful that that was never looked into enough, that truck driver, that this case might have been solved if it had been looked into. And it makes me think if that truck driver truly is responsible for Jamie going missing, he's still out there. So could he be responsible for other missing persons cases till this day? Jamie's mother, Julie, has been fighting for answers for over a decade now. And the fact that I only heard this case because someone commented on my channel is truly sad. And it makes me want to spread the word on this case even more to hopefully help get Jamie found and to get answers for this family. So if you're able to share this video out, share his missing persons flyer, go support the family on their Facebook page, the farther the story could get out, maybe someone out there may know about this truck driver. Maybe they have more information. Julie wrote a very heartfelt message on Facebook to Jamie saying, and I quote, "Your dad has since had his transplant, but spends most days staring out the window, waiting for you, hoping today will be the day. Your brothers have grown into fine young men, but still cannot speak of you without tears in their eyes. They miss their best friend, confidant, and little brother that they've always been so protective of. As for me, Jamie, I spend most of my time saying please not yet. When your strawberry grandmother recently passed away, all I could think of was please not yet, Mom. I promised you I'd find Jamie. Let me find him. When your friends settle down and start their families, I want to scream, please not yet, wait for Jamie. When another birthday or Christmas passes, I silently cry, please not yet, wait for Jamie. He will be home soon." End quote. Let's take one more good look at Jamie. He is said to be 6'1", despite some posters saying he's 6'3". He's around 150 pounds with brown hair and hazel green eyes. He was last seen wearing a brown hoodie, blue jeans, and size 13 black turquoise Adidas shoes. Here are a few other age progression photos of how he may look now since he'd be in his early 30s if he is still alive out there somewhere. I want to know how you all feel about this case. Is there a certain theory in this that you are swaying more towards? Let's have a chat about this down below. My heart goes out to Jamie's family, and I truly hope that they can get answers. As always, I hope you all stay safe out there, lock your windows and doors, and I hope to see you in the next video.